My father kicked me out the night I was 3 months pregnant. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just reached under my chair, pulled out a small box, and placed it on his dinner plate. Then I walked out into the snow and didn't look back. 7 years later, I walked into a boardroom and watched him sign away everything he owned. He had no idea he was signing it over to me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how a 22-year-old girl sleeping in her car became the woman who owned her father's debt. Because it started long before the pregnancy. It started with a signature. I was 18 when my father made me corporate secretary of CBU Development. Clayton Build United, my father Clayton Reed's company, his legacy, his empire. At least, that's what he called it. It's just a formality, he said, sliding a stack of papers across his desk. Something for your resume. You're part of the family business now. I was naive. I trusted him. So when he told me to sign, I signed. Page after page after page. I didn't read the fine print. Why would I? He was my father. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that I just signed personal guarantees for high-risk commercial loans he'd already mentally defaulted on. He used my clean credit history like a fresh vein to tap when his own ran dry. 3 months later, the collection notices started arriving. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I brought the first one to him during Sunday dinner, my hands shaking as I slid the envelope across the table. Dad, I got this notice about a loan default. I think someone might have stolen my identity. He barely looked up from his steak. Don't be dramatic. It's probably just a clerical error. But it has my name on it. My signature. Because you're corporate secretary. He said it like I was stupid for not understanding. These things happen in business. I'll handle it. But he didn't handle it. The notices kept coming. Different banks. Different amounts. All with my name attached. I tried asking him about it again. And again. Finally, he exploded. Focus on your little life and let the men handle business. He slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make the silverware jump. You don't understand how any of this works. Stop being hysterical. So I stopped asking. I buried myself in community college classes and my part-time job at a coffee shop. I told myself he was right, I didn't understand business. I was probably overreacting. Then I met Kyle. He worked for my father. Junior project manager, 26, with an easy smile and expensive taste. He drove a leased BMW and took me to restaurants I couldn't afford. Looking back, I can see he was using me to get closer to Clayton. But at 21, desperate for someone to make me feel like I mattered, I missed all the signs. I got pregnant 6 months into the relationship. When I told Kyle, he went pale. Does your father know? Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. Don't tell him, he said quickly. Not yet. Let me figure some things out first. I should have known right then. But I was scared and alone, and I wanted to believe he'd step up. He didn't. Instead, he went straight to my father. 3 days later, I was sitting at my father's dining room table. He'd called and told me we needed to talk. His voice had been cold on the phone. I walked in hoping for support. Maybe even understanding. I got neither. Clayton sat at the head of the table, Kyle standing behind him like a loyal soldier. My father didn't even let me sit down before he started. You're pregnant. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said quietly. I was going to tell you. You are a liability to this family name. His voice was ice. And you are out of the will. That was it. No, are you okay? No, what do you need? Just, out. He didn't ask who the father was, even though Kyle was standing right there. He didn't ask about my plans or if I needed help. He just pointed at the door. I looked at Kyle, waiting for him to say something. To defend me. To claim his child. He looked at the floor. That's when I understood. This wasn't about the pregnancy. This was about getting rid of me before I became a problem he couldn't control. Before I started asking more questions about those loan notices. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I reached under my chair, I'd brought it with me, knowing this might go badly, and pulled out a small box. Inside were 3 years of collection notices, all with my forged signature. I set it on his placemat. His face went white, then red. What is this? You know what it is. My voice was steady, calm. I'm not stupid, Dad. I know what you did. For a second, just a second, I thought I saw fear in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by cold rage. Get out of my house. So I did. I turned around and walked out into the January snow without my coat, without a plan, without anything except the certainty that I was completely alone. I made it to my car before I started shaking. The next 3 months were a blur of survival. I was still working at the coffee shop, but the tips barely covered food. I tried to rent an apartment, a studio in a rough neighborhood, nothing fancy, but when the leasing agent ran my credit, her expression changed. I'm sorry, she said, not meeting my eyes. I can't approve you. But I have the deposit. I have proof of employment. Your credit score is in the 400s. I can't rent to someone with that kind of risk. I tried 4 more places. Same answer every time. That's when it really hit me. What my father had done wasn't just signing my name. He destroyed my ability to function as an adult. I couldn't rent. Couldn't get a car loan. Couldn't even open a credit card. I was 6 months pregnant, and I was sleeping in my car. A 2004 Honda Civic with a broken heater and a passenger seat that didn't recline. I parked behind a 24-hour diner and kept the doors locked. At night, I'd curl up in the back seat under every jacket I owned, one hand on my belly, promising my daughter that this wasn't forever. Your mom isn't a failure, I whispered into the darkness. Your mom is going to fix this. I promise. 2 weeks of that before I found a landlord who took cash under the table. The apartment was a dump, mold in the bathroom, neighbors who screamed at 3 a.m., but it had a lock and a roof. It was enough. I gave birth to Chloe 3 months later, alone in a hospital where I paid cash because I had no insurance. The nurse asked if I wanted to call anyone. I said no. The anger didn't hit me all at once. It built slowly, like ice forming over a lake. Every time I couldn't buy Chloe the things she needed. Every time I had to explain to a creditor that no, I didn't take out that loan, my father forged my signature. Every time someone looked at me like I was lying. The anger grew. But I didn't let it make me reckless. I let it make me focused. I worked 3 jobs while Chloe was a baby. Coffee shop in the morning, data entry at night, weekend shifts at a call center. Every spare minute, I studied. Finance. Business law. Credit systems. I learned everything I could about the world that had destroyed me. And I learned something important: debt is a weapon. And if you know how to wield it, you can cut through anything. By the time Chloe was 3, I'd repaired enough of my own credit to get a small business loan. I started SH Capital, Sabrina Holt, my initials, with $15,000 and a very specific business plan. I'd taken my mother's name years ago. Clayton didn't deserve to be attached to anything I built. Distressed debt acquisition. I bought bad loans from banks that were tired of chasing people who couldn't or wouldn't pay. Then I either worked out payment plans or liquidated assets. It wasn't glamorous, but it was profitable. And it taught me exactly how the system worked. By the time Chloe was 5, SH Capital was pulling in 7 figures annually. By the time she was 6, I was monitoring my father's financial situation. And by the time she was 7, I was ready. Clayton had always been better at appearances than actual business. He could schmooze clients, play golf with city councilmen, show up at charity galas in a rented tux. But managing cash flow? Paying contractors on time? Actually finishing projects under budget? He was terrible at it. And over 7 years, it had caught up with him. He'd over-leveraged on 3 commercial developments that fell through. The interest was compounding. Banks were getting nervous. He was juggling credit lines like a street performer with too many balls in the air. It was only a matter of time before he dropped one. I made sure that when he did, I was there to catch it. I started making calls. Quiet inquiries to the VPs at the regional banks holding his notes. I understand you're dealing with a difficult account. CBU development? I specialize in distressed commercial debt. Would you be interested in discussing a purchase? They were interested. They were desperate. I bought his debt for 60 cents on the dollar. $450,000 total. Not enough to destroy a major corporation, but enough to destroy Clayton. Because unlike the banks, I wasn't interested in renegotiating. I wanted blood. My lawyer Benjamin called on a Tuesday. He responded to the pressure, Benjamin said. Asking for a meeting. Wants to discuss restructuring. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Set it up, I said. But make it urgent. 48-hour window. I want him desperate. Already done. He's coming in Thursday at 3 p.m. Thursday. 2 days away. I had 48 hours to prepare for the moment I'd been building toward for 7 years. I didn't sleep much that night. The law firm was downtown, 42nd floor, corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. I'd rented the space specifically for this. Soundproofed walls. High-end furniture. A laptop positioned on the conference table with an active webcam. I told Clayton's lawyer it was for silent partners in Zurich who wanted to observe. Really, it was so I could watch from the adjacent room. I sat in the dark, staring at the video feed, waiting. At 2:58 p.m., the door opened. Clayton walked in first. 7 years. I hadn't seen him in 7 years. He looked older, thinner. The stress showed in the lines around his eyes, the way his expensive suit hung a little loose on his frame. But the arrogance was still there. The way he threw his coat over a chair, the way he sat at the head of the table like he owned the place. Behind him came Kyle. My heart stopped. I'd known he still worked for Clayton, I'd done my research, but seeing him on the screen was different. He looked soft. Weak. The kind of weak that comes from choosing comfort over character. He was carrying Clayton's briefcase. Still playing loyal dog after all these years. Clayton looked around the office with disdain. Waste of money. Designed to make venture capitalists feel important. Kyle shifted uncomfortably. You sure these people are legitimate? They moved fast. No due diligence. Stop sweating, Clayton snapped. They're not looking at the books. They're looking at the brand. CBU still means something. I leaned closer to the screen. He was so confident. So sure he was about to con his way out of trouble one more time. Here's the plan, Clayton continued, leaning back in the chair. We take their money, pay off the immediate fires, and in 6 months we refinance. Kick this down the road until the market turns. There it was. He wasn't planning to fix anything. He was planning to keep the cycle going. A junkie looking for his next fix. Clayton's lawyer started to speak, but Clayton cut him off. Once the wire hits, I want $50,000 moved to the Cayman account immediately. I'm not losing my lake house deposit because some suppliers are crying about invoices. Kyle looked nervous. Maybe we should. This reminds me of my daughter, Clayton said suddenly, laughing. It was a cruel sound. She used to worry about this stuff too. Permits, budgets, all that nonsense. My hands clenched. Kyle said my name. Sabrina was just. Don't say her name. Clayton's voice went cold. She was weak. Couldn't handle the pressure of real business. She's probably waiting tables somewhere, blaming me for all her problems. He paused, and I watched him shake his head with disgust. She was a bad asset. A write-off. Not a daughter. An asset. A line item that didn't produce returns. I stared at his face on the screen, this man who was supposed to protect me, who was supposed to love me, and I felt nothing. No pain. No sadness. Just cold, absolute certainty. I texted Benjamin. Send it in. Benjamin entered the room like death in a suit. No pleasantries. No handshake. Just a heavy leather binder placed in the center of the table. Clayton pulled it toward him, flipping pages with the desperation of an addict looking for his fix. He found what he wanted on page 450. This cleans everything with the regional banks. Contingent on signature, Benjamin said flatly. Clayton pulled out his Mont Blanc pen. Gold-plated. Probably bought on credit. He hovered over the signature line. Then stopped. Flipped back to clause 14. My heart hammered. Don't read it. Don't read it. Don't. This clause about default triggering immediate acceleration. Clayton's con artist instincts were finally kicking in. What's this about? Benjamin checked his watch. Bored. Professional. Mr. Reed, the wire window closes at 4 p.m. That's 4 minutes. If we miss it, everything sits in escrow through the weekend. We'll have to re-underwrite Monday. Interest rates increased this morning. Terms will change. It was a complete lie. There was no wire window. But Clayton didn't know that. I watched the war play out on his face. Caution versus desperation. He knew payroll was bouncing tomorrow. Knew the repo company was coming for his Mercedes on Monday. Desperation won. I'll sign now. The pen touched paper. Ink flowed. He signed his name large and looping, the signature of a man who thought he mattered. Kyle, witness. Kyle signed without hesitation. They had no idea. In New York commercial law, a confession of judgment is legal. Brutal, but legal. By signing it, Clayton waived his right to trial, to counsel, to notice. He just handed me a loaded gun and authorized me to pull the trigger. Clayton closed the binder with satisfaction. Get me wire confirmation. The trap was shut. Time to spring it. I walked in wearing charcoal gray. Tailored. Professional. Not the thrift store coat from 7 years ago. The room went silent. Clayton looked up, annoyed. Then his brain caught up with his eyes. Recognition hit him like a truck. Sit down, I said calmly. Kyle stood up. This is a private. You're meeting with SH Capital. Sabrina Holt Capital. I let that sink in. Did you seriously not check the LLC filing? So desperate you never looked at who was signing the check. Clayton's mouth opened. Closed. I could see his brain working, trying to find the angle, the play. You buying my debt makes you a partner, he said finally. This contract gives me 6 months. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Open it. Inside were photographs. High resolution. Dated yesterday. The Caterpillar excavators and cranes he'd listed as collateral, already repossessed, sitting in a Newark salvage yard. You pledged assets you don't own, I said. The contract states the borrower warrants collateral is in their possession and lien-free. You committed fraud the second you signed. I turned to Benjamin. Execute. Benjamin explained in the flat tone of someone reading a death certificate. The confession of judgment allows immediate judgment upon default. I e-filed the affidavit this morning. It's already entered. Clayton's face went white. SH Capital now has liens on your accounts, investments, and primary residence. Garnishments are being served as we speak. Your accounts are frozen. Your cards are dead. The repo company's on the way to get your Mercedes. That's illegal, Kyle shouted. It's commercial law, I said. And it's done. Clayton collapsed into his chair, suddenly small. I'm your father, he whispered. The word hung in the air. Father. You were my father when you forged my signature, I said quietly. When you destroyed my credit. When you left me sleeping in my car at 6 months pregnant, promising my daughter her mother wasn't a failure. I paused. You're not a father. You're a bad investment. And I just liquidated you. Then Kyle smiled. Actually smiled. A process server walked in and handed me papers. Ex parte custody order. Emergency temporary sole custody to Kyle, effective immediately. The order was based on an affidavit, signed by Clayton that morning, claiming I was mentally unstable and posed a danger to my child. Clayton watched me with pure hatred. If he couldn't have my money, he'd take my daughter. Kyle leaned forward. Here's the deal. Unfreeze his accounts. Return the company. Drop everything. Maybe, I'll reconsider the custody arrangement. He thought he'd won. Otherwise, Chloe leaves with me today. I looked at Benjamin. What was Kyle's retainer for custody counsel? $15,000, Kyle said proudly, holding up a check copy. Already paid. I read the routing number aloud, then smiled. That's drawn on Clayton's personal account at First City Bank. The account I froze 4 minutes before you walked in here. I looked at Kyle. That check's going to bounce. Your lawyer won't file a motion. He'll drop you before sunset. Kyle's smile crumbled. I turned to Clayton. You just admitted to perjury. In front of 3 witnesses. Benjamin is an officer of the court. He's obligated to report it. All the arrogance drained out of the room. No money. No leverage. No lawyer. Perjury investigation incoming. Leave, I said. Before I have security remove you. Kyle crumpled the custody papers and walked out without a word. Clayton stayed, waiting for mercy. I had none left to give. Go. He shuffled out like a man already dead. 3 weeks later, family court vacated the custody order. Kyle didn't show, his lawyer had dropped him, just like I said. I got full custody. Kyle got supervised visitation he never used. Clayton's company liquidated. The house went to auction. He filed bankruptcy, but the confession of judgment meant most assets were already gone. I heard he moved to Arizona. Living in a rental. Working sales. The life he built, gone. And me? I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. One night, Chloe asked about her grandfather. Why doesn't Grandpa visit? I could have told her everything. Instead, I said, sometimes people make choices that hurt the people they love. And those choices mean they can't be part of our lives. She nodded. Okay. Can we have mac and cheese? Just like that, she moved on. I wish I could say I did too. But I didn't forgive him. I didn't find closure. What I did do was stop letting him take up space in my head. I built my company, raised my daughter, created a life that had nothing to do with him. 7 years to destroy him. 7 more to realize the best revenge wasn't his destruction. It was my daughter's happiness. My success. Waking up every morning in a life I built from nothing. Clayton lost everything. And I gained everything that actually mattered. Thanks for listening, and if this story hit home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about resilience, revenge, and rising from the ashes when the people who should protect you become the ones you need protection from. Sometimes the best signature you can give is the one you write on your own life.